Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for being here. My name is Sue Urson. I'm a member of the Clallam County League of Women Voters, and I will be your moderator for the evening. The League appreciates that the City of Port Angeles has asked us to facilitate this evening's forum, as well as the one that will be held next week on October 29th. The League is noted for its experience in conducting public meetings and assuring a balanced presentation of information. Keeping track of the time allowed to each speaker is important to a balanced presentation. Two League members, Tom and Helen Montgomery, are sitting in the front row and will serve as our timers. Their job is to ensure that our speakers stay within our time limits. Also, in case you're wondering, neither the Montgomerys nor I live within the area served by the city's fluoridated water. Before we begin, I want to ask for a few courtesies that the League typically requests at our forums. Please, as was just mentioned, turn off or mute all your cell phones and devices that make noise. We ask that you not use any recording devices during the forum other than what the city has authorized. Also, please refrain from applauding in any way, interrupting our speakers, so that we don't reduce the time available for our forum. We intend the forum to last for 2 hours. I'll be sure to give you an opportunity at the end of the evening to give a round of applause for all of the speakers. Also, as was mentioned, at the end of the forum, the committees have agreed to be available in the lobby to answer further questions. As City Manager McKean has explained to you, the purpose of this hearing is for the City Council and the public to hear the pro and con positions on the issue of fluoridation of the city's municipal water supply. City Manager McKean has also told you a little bit about how the questions the speakers will address were selected. There will be no further questions from the city, the council, or the public can be put forth after the end of the question period. Our evening is organized into 3 segments. The first part will give each position for fluoridation or against fluoridation 10 minutes to make their opening statements. Just before we began this evening, we had a coin toss. The side winning the toss was given the choice of making their opening statement first or second, and the pro-fluoridation won the toss. And they are going to give their presentation first. The second part will provide the opportunity for each position to present its responses to the 6 questions that were pre-selected by the City Council. This part will comprise approximately 40 minutes. I will provide further details on how we will conduct this part when we reach that point. There will be a break following the question segment before the closing statements are made. And that is the third part and final part, which will be 15-minute closing statement by each position. The side which spoke first in the opening statements will be second in this segment. So we're going to start with the opening statements, and the first opening statements will be from the pro-fluoridation panelists. I'm going to read the bios of each of the members of the pro-fluoridation panel, and then when it's time for the opening statement from the committee that's opposed to the fluoridation, I will read their bios. So the biographical information that I'm going to share with you as I introduce these speakers was provided by the committees. Dr. Thomas Locke, MD, MPH, is a board-certified specialist in preventive medicine and public health. He served as the Clallam County Health Officer from 1987 to 2015. He currently serves as the Jefferson County Health Officer, the Deputy Health Officer for Clallam County, and is co-medical director of the Jamestown Family Health Center. He is on the faculty of the University of Washington School of Public Health and Community Medicine, and he chairs the Board of Trustees of the Washington Dental Service Foundation. He has won numerous awards for his work promoting universal health care access and healthcare system reform. Dr. Bri Butler is the Olympic Peninsula's first pediatric dentist, specializing in treating children as well as patients with special needs. She received her bachelor's degree at the University of San Diego, then returned to the Northwest to complete her dental education at the University of Washington. She also received her pediatric certification and a Master's of Dentistry from the University of Washington and Seattle Children's Hospital. She is president-elect of the Washington State Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. When she was a dental student, she spent the summer working as an assistant for OLICAP in Port Angeles. Dr. Todd Irwin is a Pacific Northwest native. He attended the University of Utah for undergraduate studies and the University of Louisville Dental School in Kentucky. Dr. Irwin is passionate about dentistry and is known to use vacation time to further his dental education. He served as president of the Olympic Peninsula Dental Society from 2001 to 2007 and has numerous other professional and community affiliations. Dr. Irwin is also a fellow in the Pierre Fauchard Academy, an honorary dental organization. He is a husband and the father of 5. Madeleine Harrington, MD, is a pediatrician at the Peninsula Children's Clinic in Port Angeles. She graduated from the University of Hawaii and completed medical school at Duke University School of Medicine. She finished her pediatric residency at the University of Connecticut. Dr. Harrington worked as a pediatrician for the Indian Health Service at Fort Defiance, Arizona, before moving to Port Angeles in 1984. And at this time, you may begin your opening remarks.
Thank you, Sue. So as you heard, I'm a pediatric dentist, and one of the things I want to answer first is why am I here? Why did I feel compelled to speak here today to everyone? And that's because I truly care about the general and dental health of the children in the community that I live in and that I serve. As a dentist, one of my main skills is to fix cavities, but I don't believe that that is my main purpose. My hope is to eradicate or do away with cavities, a disease that is preventable. But although TCA is preventable, it is still the most common chronic disease of childhood. And it's one that I see every single day of my work. My specialty is working with children, something that I enjoy and love to do every single day. But there are aspects of my job that are not my favorite. I have children that are so young and have so much decay that general anesthesia is required. This is something I do every week. That they have so many cavities that we can't see them because they're too young to take care of them in the dental chair. I have to take children's front teeth out before they're 2 years old because the decay is so bad I can't restore them, and those children have to go through childhood without front teeth. I have children that come in with fevers and pain who haven't slept in 2 days because their dental pain and their dental infections are so bad, and they're begging their parents to go see a dentist. I have children that have to take out of school multiple times because they have to get cavities fixed, and that takes away from their learning. I love that I'm able to help these children and that I have the skills to help them. But I have to pause and think, how could we have prevented this? One of the ways we can prevent that is through water fluoridation. Water fluoridation is a safe and effective way to fight the war against tooth decay. It is not a replacement for good oral hygiene and good dietary habits, but it is a vital and important tool for our community to help fight the tooth decay in all ages. Not everyone in the community has access to dental care, or even the knowledge of how to prevent these cavities when they have children that are so young. But community water fluoridation is a safe and cost-effective way for us to give preventable dental care to those who are most in need. It is a way for us to serve them before they even know that we're serving them, to give them a chance. 70 years ago, Grand Rapids, Michigan was the first city to change fluoride levels in drinking water to help fight cavities, a result that was seen in other communities by the natural level of fluoride that they had in their water. Grand Rapids benefited and saw lower cavity rates, and then the rest of the nation and some of the world followed. I understand wanting to know what's in your water and making sure it's safe for you and your family. And that's why there's over 3,000 studies that have shown that water fluoridation is safe, effective, and a cost-effective way to help prevent cavities through a lifetime. Let's talk about Port Angeles. Water fluoridation in Port Angeles started in 2006, and guess what? It's working. Cavities have decreased 20% between 2005 and 2010. But there's still more work to do. There's still children in my chair. I still have a waiting list for children to get into general anesthesia. I want to be part of this fight to continue to help decrease cavities in our community. But getting rid of water fluoridation will only make the fight harder for all of us. It will put more kids in my dental chair who need fillings, crowns, or extractions. It will put more kids at risk of needing general anesthesia at such a young, vulnerable age. It will take more kids out of school, and it will put more costs on our community. Water fluoridation works for everyone, it saves money for everyone, and it is safe for everyone. I want to thank the League of Women Voters as well. Thank you.
And now we'll have our second opening statement to be made by the committee who is opposed to fluoridation. They also will have 10 minutes to explain their position and provide any supporting information they wish to present. Let me read the biographies of the members of that committee. Eloise Kailin, MD, graduated from George Washington University School of Medicine and is board certified in allergy and immunology. Dr. Kailin was editor of the Journal of Allergy, abstract section, for over 30 years, and assistant professor of medicine on the teaching staff of Howard University School of Medicine until 1971, when she moved to SQUIM. She is the author of 20 published peer-reviewed researched articles, including double-blind studies. Dr. Kailin has an active solo practice of allergy in the District of Columbia area and then in SQUIM. She has been active in environmental affairs and is corresponding secretary of Protect the Peninsula's Future. Stephanie Noblin holds BA and master's degree in health, education, and biology. Her career includes 18 years public school and tenured college level teaching, plus 20 years in sales and sales management for a major manufacturer of products for new mothers and babies. Currently, she is the creator and videographer for Clallam Public Eye, an online government and public meeting transparency project on YouTube as a public service to the citizens of Clallam County. She serves on the board of directors for the new Peninsula Area Public Access TV. Bill Osmunson, DDS, MPH, is an anesthetic and comprehensive neuromuscular dental surgeon. He has a master's degree in health education, is an author and researcher, and for 25 years a promoter of community water fluoridation. Dr. Osmunson had his private practice in Sandpoint, Idaho, and worked with two son-in-law dentists in Lake Oswego, Oregon, as well as Bellevue, Washington. Dr. Osmunson is former Director of Occlusion and Research at the Las Vegas Institute for Advanced Dental Studies. He currently provides comprehensive and public health dentistry in Neah Bay. Crystal Track, MD, LAC, Board Certified Acupuncturist, Board Certified Doctor of Naturopathy, Director of Swim Clinic for Acupuncture, Naturopathic, and Hyperbaric Medicine for 25 years. She is also the founder of the Four Angels Health Ranch. And you now will do your opening statement.
I'm Eloise Kailin, and we're grateful that our present council is asking if its consumers wish to continue fluoridation and giving us an opportunity to present the science that says fluoridation is neither safe nor effective. City Council is put in the position to act as each individual's physician, administering without their consent a substance which has not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. The city is doing what no physician can ethically do. I do not give my consent to be fluoridated. No federal or state agency accepts authority to determine both safety and efficacy of ingesting fluoride. Neither goal has been met. You need to be certain that those of us who are the most vulnerable, especially infants, are safe. Presently, they are not safe. Do no harm. I remind you that fluoridated water is not necessary. Fluoride piles up in our bones to toxic levels. Fluoride is not just fluoride. The purchased product includes arsenic and lead. Fluoride should be a choice, and you should give us the choice. Fluoride damages those who cannot defend themselves. There are alternative sources of fluoride for those who want fluoride, such as foods, medications, and swallowing fluoride dental products. Stopping fluoridation does not increase dental caries in a community that has had fluoridation. More than 41% of children show that they are swallowing too much fluoride. Citizens of fluoride vote no on fluoridation.
Tonight, we're going to show a movie throughout our presentation called Our Daily Dose. It'll be woven in and out of the speaking parts. I'm sure you'll recognize it and its importance from its contents. So it'll be playing somewhat in the background. Fellow citizens, we are hoping that you look at the science and the science-backed information that we will be presenting tonight. Once you understand the information and the science, we hope your common sense will prevail. You will hear all the information tonight, and if you are still unsure, why not follow the logic of first do no harm, or when in doubt, leave it out, or my right to choose. Their takeaways, that should be your takeaways from this meeting. You might want to include in your thoughts unavoidable medication without consent, or the FDA warnings on all toothpaste with fluoride that says, do not swallow. I'm trying to watch the timing here too. The FDA also says no fluoride should be consumed by our babies. So what about the babies receiving formula made with fluoridated tap water? How many moms can afford to buy unfluoridated water, or even know that they should? Tonight, we will hear from our Clean Water Advocates group. We will present evidence. Tonight, you will hear evidence that is based on standard scientific method or peer-reviewed studies. This means scientific, peer-reviewed studies in contrast to the opposition's misrepresentations, testimonials, anecdotes, and opinions. For instance, the flyer that I hold up in my hand today, that came from keeppahealthy.org, was sent to citizens this week by the fluoride proponents. Let me read the first two sentences. I'll read them so that I don't misquote. We have already seen improvement in children's oral health since Port Angeles began fluoridation. Between 2005 and 2010, cavities reported among Clallam County's low-income preschoolers decreased by almost 20%. In case you didn't know it, there are two lies in that sentence that I just read. Lie number one is that low-income preschoolers from Clallam County were in the survey. The fact is that there were no low-income preschoolers from Clallam County in that survey. Lie number two is that the cavities in the said group of preschoolers decreased by almost 20%. The fact is that the SMILE survey by the Washington Department of Health says that the amount of decay in low-income children was as high in 2010 as it was in 2005. There was no decline in cavities. In fact, the Washington Dental Services Foundation, who published these outrageous claims, was admonished by the Washington Department of Health in 2011 for claiming that the amount of dental decay declined in children. The same untrue statement was listed in the Foundation's fact sheet about the SMILES survey results. Dr. Tom Locke is on the board of directors of the Foundation that published that false claim. Of course, we know that Dr. Locke was the Chief Health Officer for Clallam County. From what we are finding here, Clallam County's former health officer, along with the dentists that support the Foundation, are not telling the truth, according to the Washington Department of Health. In over 70 years of use of fluoride in water systems, there has not been one randomized, controlled study of the relative safety and effectiveness of fluoride. That is why the FDA states emphatically, do not swallow on dental products containing fluoride. I end with one very important point. Fluoride is not an essential nutrient that's required by any of the body's biological or metabolic processes. When you receive your ballot, vote no to fluoride our water.
Very simple. 7 years ago, something was added to this water. Added to this town's drinking water. It did something to the teeth, or for them. And the children's teeth just don't have as many cavities anymore. And here's how it happened.
Fluorine is the most reactive element on the planet, and because of this unique property, fluoride quickly assumed a major role in the growing chemical industry of the mid-20th century, in the manufacturing of aluminum for giants like Alcoa, steel for corporations like U.S. Steel, fluorocarbons for refrigerants, and Teflon for DuPont. But fluoride's most significant role was in uranium enrichment during the race to develop the atomic bomb during World War II, and the many thousands of bombs that would follow. Just months before the Second World War ended, 107 barrels of sodium fluoride were delivered to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it made history as the first city to add fluoride into its public water supply.
There really was not ever a good study that clearly demonstrated safety and effectiveness.
Dr. Kathleen Thiessen is one of the top scientific experts in the world on fluoride. She served as one of 12 committee members for the National Research Council's scientific review of fluoride in 2006.
There were several things suspected in the 1940s and early 50s that they knew about, they ignored. They said, we're not going to talk about it, nobody discussed this out loud. We're just not going to pursue these things.
Dr. Harold Hodge, a distinguished toxicologist on the Rochester team, has carefully investigated the safety of fluoridation.
Well, to put it very simply, fluoride is safe at 1 part per million. We sometimes say fluoride poison. Yes, of course it's a poison. In large doses.
We used to think about poisons in terms of dose, but now we also think about them in terms of the timing of exposure. So even a little bit of the poison at a critical time in a child's development can have lifelong negative impacts on that child's brain.
The evidence simply does not support a benefit of water fluoridation. It does support, or at least suggest, the likelihood of a number of adverse health effects, and at the very least, we need to be taking a good look at it. We can't simply say the science has been settled for 70 years, don't look at it anymore. That's a cop-out.
But entrenched beliefs persist, like a recent email from senior science correspondent Donald McNeil of the New York Times. I understand that you disagree, but I think it's fair to say that most members of the science staff of the New York Times consider this debate to have been decided in fluoride's favor about 50 years ago.
That concludes the opening statements, and we're now going to start the second part of this forum, which is focused discussion of questions chosen by the council. The Port Angeles City Council at their October 6th meeting reviewed 10 questions which each of the two committees had submitted, and then selected 3 from each committee. I will be asking the committees to respond to these questions, taking them in the order in which the council gave the highest score. Each committee will have 4 minutes to respond to the question. After each question is addressed by the pro and con positions, each side will be given an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal if they choose. Otherwise, I will move on to the next question. The order of the responses for questions depends on which committee submitted which question. So question number 1 is, what studies and reviews demonstrate the safety of community water fluoridation? And the first response is from the pro committee.
Thank you. My name is Madeleine Harrington, and I've been a pediatrician here for over 30 years. This is a very easy question to answer, because in fact over 3,000 studies over 70 years have consistently shown that water fluoridation is safe for people of all ages. There is in fact not one credible study that shows it is not safe. Now, our opponents will try to scare you and talk about fluorosis. Fluorosis is what happens when fluoride is incorporated into the enamel of the teeth in place of calcium. Fluoride is a harder element than calcium, and teeth that have fluoride in them are harder and stronger and more decay resistant over a person's entire lifetime. Fluorosis can cause small white flecks on the teeth. Now, severe fluorosis, about which I am sure the opponents will speak, where you have brown teeth, is only seen in areas of natural high fluoride. It is not seen in community fluoridated water. I'd like to tell you a short story, a personal story about fluorosis. When I was growing up in California, the anti-fluoride folks persuaded the city council that fluoride was a communist plot designed to soften our brains. For this reason, I spent many unhappy hours in the dentist's chair. When I had my own 2 children, I was determined to spare them that. And so, since I wasn't living in a city with fluoridated water, I gave them fluoride drops, and I gave them fluoride drops every single day. I didn't miss a day. And I gave them twice the current recommended amount of fluoride, because at that time, that was the recommendation, and guess what? They have fluorosis. They have beautiful smiles, they have strong, healthy teeth, and it hasn't hurt their IQ one little bit. I wish that all of you could come to my office and see the children I see with rotten, painful teeth. If you even had one toothache, you can imagine how much they suffer. When I first came here 30 years ago, this was a frequent occurrence. Now it's very rare. And I can't imagine that anyone who knows about this can willingly take away the fluoride in our water. Children are our most vulnerable citizens. They have no power, no money, no special interest groups. And I believe that it is our ethical and moral duty to protect and defend them, both as healthcare professionals and as elected public servants. Thank you.
And now the Con Committee will have 4 minutes for their answer to the question.
Thank you very much, City Council members. I'm Dr. Osmunson, Bill Osmunson, and I promoted fluoridation for about 25 years. I want to note here that we have a disagreement, but I also want to remind you that I promoted it. I used to sit on that side. So if I say something that is disparaging, I don't mean that, because I respect these physicians and dentists very much. Dr. Spittle said that there's no assuredly safe level, is 0. Now, the question is studies and reviews demonstrating safety. They said 3,000 studies. I've looked at some of them. I can assure you I haven't read them all. But those studies are not high-quality studies. The National Research Council is the highest level of research experts that we have in the United States. And they reported that the EPA's maximum contaminant level, because fluoride is a contaminant in water, is too high because of several reasons. Tooth damage, rheumatoid arthritis-like pain, bone cancer, bone fractures, thyroid reduction, kidney damage, reproductive problems, lower IQ, and allergies, gastrointestinal disorders. That's quite a list. If you read their page, it definitely does not say that it's safe and effective. The EPA agrees that aggregate exposure to fluoride for certain major identifiable population subgroups does not meet the safety standard of the Federal Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act, Section 408. EPA agrees that the fluoride maximum contaminant level goal is not protective of the effects of fluoride on teeth and bones, that fluoride maximum contaminant level goal is not protective, neurotoxic, endocrine, renal effects. The EPA has not adequately protected children. The EPA cannot determine the safety of sulfurlyl fluoride and fluoride in the absence of a developmental neurotoxic study. There are none. The EPA has underestimated the exposure of fluoride, and the EPA has committed procedural errors in violation of administrative acts. This is dental fluorosis. I treat dental fluorosis. I'm a cosmetic dentist, aesthetic, not anesthetic, but aesthetic dentist. And these are some of the cases that we do have been treating them, because some people don't like those little white spots. If I went to your car and I scratched it with a key, it's just cosmetic, okay? It's not damage. I think it's damage for some people, maybe not for others. Dentistry is one problem. Another problem we have is, how come that went too fast? Well, anyway, we're going to get going over here. The fluoride bomb. Fluoride bomb is when the outer shell of the tooth is harder with fluoride, but the decay explodes inside, so it's hard to diagnose it. That's why one of the reasons there's a delay in diagnosis. So when we go in and clean out that decay, the decay is bigger with the fluoride than it is without the fluoride. And fluoride also causes the tooth to become harder, which fractures more. So we end up doing more crowns later in life. That's one thing problem with the tooth. The second problem is with the brain that is real concerning. When we have low iodine, we have more severe damage to the body. A lowering of 8 to 10 IQ points is not uncommon in the research. There are over 45 human studies now showing that there's harm, over 100 animal studies. The EPA uses an uncertainty factor of 1:1 for water in our water division, but 1,000 in their pesticide division. When we look at the Harvard study that was out, the meta-analysis, there's an average of 7 IQ points lost. We can see on the left side there, 0, and most of them are low. You can see a graph. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now the Pro Committee will have a 1-minute rebuttal.
Yes, thank you. What you just heard is the first of many misstatements of fact. And the anti-fluoride side always likes to point out these studies of the National Research Council without mentioning that these studies have nothing to do with community water fluoridation. These are studies of naturally occurring fluoride and whether the fluoride levels in groundwater is too high, and if it is too high, what should it be lowered to? The report he's citing in 2006 explicitly says this has no bearing on community water fluoridation. I'll address these IQ studies, which are also being completely misrepresented here. I'll address those later. Thank you.
And the Con Committee has 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Yes, well, actually, it does have to do with water fluoridation very much. When we ingest too much fluoride, whether that's from water or from toothpaste or from any other source, it increases our total exposure. And this is where these folks have missed it totally. They don't look at the total exposure. When we get too much fluoride from any source, and water adds to that source, that's when we start having a reduction in IQ of 7 IQ points. Here's a very important point. When you reduce IQ throughout the population, you put 50% more mentally retarded, and you have, well, much less than half of the gifted. We hit all of them. In the United States, this is happening here, okay? If you look at this on the left-hand side, what happens when the brain is affected? We have more divorce, more unemployment, more labor force out of work, more poverty, more chronic welfare, more high school dropout. It is a huge problem. Okay? Okay, thank you.
Okay, the second question that both panels will answer is, please provide one prospective randomized controlled trial of fluoridation's efficacy. What modern peer-reviewed published study controlled for socio and economic, racial, and age factors reports statistical significance supportive of claims of a 30% reduction in tooth decay? And the Con Committee will have 4 minutes.
Okay, this is a very important one because they're on prospective randomized controlled trials. They are possible. They haven't been done. None. 70 years, the gold standard of research is not there. None. Zero. They don't have any. They have 3,000 studies, but they haven't provided any quality studies. Who's responsible for those quality studies? Now, if we were manufacturing a drug, who's responsible? If I'm manufacturing it, I'm responsible for providing those studies to the FDA. The final manufacturer is responsible. Not the doctors here, not me, not you, not the patients, but the manufacturer. That's the law. Who's the manufacturer, the final manufacturer of the water fluoridation? That's you folks. You're the ones who are supposed to be providing us with the research proving that it's safe and effective, not us. You have to prove that to the FDA. The tables have been turned. You're fluoridating us without our choice in the land of the free. Okay, the FDA says do not swallow. How can we get it more simple than that? Do not swallow. That's the Food and Drug Administration. What about do not swallow so hard to understand? The FDA also says it's not effective in fluoride pills. There is no substantial evidence of drug effectiveness as prescribed, recommended, or suggested in its label and marketing is in violation of the new drug provisions of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. They have therefore requested that marketing of these products be discontinued. Fluoride tablets are an unapproved drug, and unapproved drugs are considered illegal drugs by the FDA. That's back in 1975. There's no difference between whether you dissolve the pill in my glass of water, or whether I dissolve it in a glass of water and swallow it, or I swallow it and dissolve it with a glass of water. Thank you. Now let's look at the toothpaste label. It says drug facts. Why? Because fluoride topically is approved. And it says, come on here, do not swallow. That's for safety reasons. Do not. Well, a little bit's okay, isn't it? No, 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 no. What about do not swallow is so hard to understand? Do not swallow. That's the FDA. Even a little pea-sized amount. And when I calculated that amount, I used pea-sized that amount. But when I was testifying in Oregon, Dr. Pollack said, well, actually, it's half that size, but it means that it's just a 1/4 milligram. A 1/4 milligram comes to me in Port Angeles water in about 9 ounces, this size. That's the same amount that the FDA is saying, do not swallow. You're making me swallow, but the FDA says, do not swallow. There's a disconnect here somewhere, okay? If I swallow that amount, that's what's called the Poison Control Center. Whoa, the FDA is very serious. Do not swallow. On what basis? Well, that's on the basis of safety. So what keep on going too fast. Okay, on the outside of the tooth, there is higher fluoride concentration, but not inside, because systemically it doesn't make a difference. Topically it does. The American Dental Association says after 60 years of community water fluoridation, we still do not know how much fluoride is required to prevent caries. We don't know how much. Let's suppose that there are 100 people here. The back person is drinking 1% of the water, and you're drinking 100%. The middle person is the mean. They're drinking 50%. But the 90th percentile right over there, they're drinking 2 liters of water. They're drinking 1 liter, they're drinking 2. At 95%, they're drinking 5 liters of water. At 100, you're drinking over 10 liters of water. There's no control of dosage.
And the pro-fluoridation committee has 4 minutes to respond.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, this is a very familiar question to us. It's a favorite of the National Anti-Fluoride website, and it's actually 2 questions. I'm assuming, though, that I don't get 4 minutes to answer each one. First, there is no study of this kind that the question asks for, and that's because that is the wrong kind of study to do if you want to evaluate the effectiveness of fluoridation. The right kind of study of a public health strategy like community water fluoridation is what's called a case control study. In a case control study, a fluoridated community is compared to a non-fluoridated community over a long time period. This can also be done on a single community where you look at it before and after the introduction of community water fluoridation. After a number of small studies, the first major study of this type began in 1945 in Grand Rapids and Muskegon, Michigan. It was to last 15 years and to involve 20,000 children. However, after 6 years, a 65% reduction in tooth decay was seen in the children drinking the fluoridated water. The trial was discontinued, and Muskegon, the city without fluoridation, chose to begin fluoridating. With the benefits of fluoridation so clear, it was decided it would be unethical to not let Muskegon choose to fluoridate. Similar studies were conducted between Newburgh and Kingston, New York, Evanston and Oak Park, Illinois, and these were case control studies, with one city getting the fluoridation, the other not. The results of these initial studies were very dramatic, with 60 to 80% drops in cavity rates. And these kind of initial results were the reason that water fluoridation became national public policy in the 1960s. Now for the second part of this question, modern studies of this type don't show 60 to 80% reduction in cavities. Improvements are more in the 25 to 40% range. And that's because the overall rate of dental decay is lower nowadays. And people are getting the beneficial effects of fluoride from a number of sources other than water fluoridation. And in fact, even people drinking non-fluoridated water get about 1/3 of the recommended amount of fluoride in their diets, eating food and beverages that are made in urban areas that have fluoridated water. This is known as the halo effect. The benefits of community water fluoridation extend like a halo beyond the boundaries of those fluoridated systems. With respect to modern studies, if you had to pick one, I'd go with the systematic review of 21 studies done by the Community Preventive Services Task Force. And this was first published in October of 2000, and it found that fluoridated water reduces tooth decay by 29% in children ages 4 to 17. The underlying studies of this report and many more can be found on the ilikemyteeth.org website. And they also have an updated systematic review from April of 2013. In total, more than 3,000 peer-reviewed studies have consistently demonstrated that people who drink fluoridated water have fewer cavities and lower dental costs than those who do not.
Now we have a minute rebuttal from the Con Committee, and I'm going to ask if you could just minimize your screen when you're done.
Okay.
Thank
I can
you.
do that. Two things. One, if it was so safe and effective, why haven't they gone to the FDA and gotten approval? Because the FDA says it isn't effective. They didn't even look at safety because they didn't need to, because it's not approved. Fluoride is not approved. Now, let's go back to the very first part. Dr. Locke has partly correct. Partly correct is case-controlled studies are important, but randomized controlled trials are even more secure and better. And they haven't been done, and that's why the FDA says, no, doesn't work. You've got to have better quality studies. When it comes to effectiveness, randomized controlled studies are possible, they haven't been done, and it's just a bunch of excuses that they haven't done it. Of course, that's your responsibility to do them. When it comes to safety, that's when you use your case-controlled studies. Because we can't sit there and say, who's going to volunteer their child to see when they start getting brain damage? That's not ethical. So we have to go to case-controlled studies. But when it goes to efficacy, you can do that, randomized controlled trials. Thank you.
And the Pro Committee has 1 minute for rebuttal.
First of all, the EPA regulates water additives, not the FDA, so that's a non-issue. But on this issue of randomized prospective studies, the reason these are not done is it's not feasible to do this. If you were to do this kind of study, you would have to figure out a way to have a city where all the houses were randomly connected to different water systems, and some fluoridated, some not. And then even that wouldn't be enough. You'd have to have everyone carry around water packs that they filled up every day and took to work or school that had the right kind of water in them. You can't do randomized studies of a public health strategy like this. It'd be a foolish and expensive study to do, even if you could figure out the way to do it. And it's not surprising that no one has done it. Thank you.
Well, question number 3. If a person wants to ingest fluoride, what other sources of fluoride are available? And the Con Committee will have 4 minutes to answer this.
Okay, they are possible. We figured out how you can do that. It is possible to do randomized controlled studies. They just don't want to do them. There are places where it can be done easily. How much fluoride do you want? Okay, if you want from other sources, you have to first of all decide how much fluoride you want. Let's look at the tooth. The tooth has the same amount of fluoride in it, whether you have dental caries or not. What is the percentage of fluoride that you want? What are the parts per million that you want that show that it's effective? They never will tell you. Why? Because we don't know. There's the same amount of fluoride in decayed and not decayed teeth. On the outer surface, topical, yeah, there's a little bit from toothpaste. So you first of all have to decide how much you want. The FDA says the evidence for ingesting fluoride is incomplete. Mother's milk has no fluoride in most samples. Why do you think that infants should have more fluoride? Mother's milk is the normative value against which all other formulas, sources of nutrition for an infant, should be judged. Why do you doctors think that you know more than mother's milk? Breastfed babies have 7.5 higher IQ. Why? I'm wondering if it's that Port Angeles water that has the fluoride. Now, one of the things that we talk about, we all agree that dental caries is a concern. It is. I don't want to minimize that. But if you look at this slide here, you'll see that the bottom teeth aren't too bad. It's the top teeth that are bad because that's diet. Your bottom caries. You're not going to reduce dental caries with fluoride when you've got a bunch of juice and milk sitting there all night long. I talked briefly about this. 90th percentile have 2 liters a day of water. 99th percentile have 5 liters, 95th, sorry, that should be 95th percentile have 5 liters of water a day, or equivalent of, at 0.7 parts per million, 3.5 milligrams per day. And there are 45 human studies reporting 7 IQ lost at about 3.5 milligrams per day. So there are about 5% of the population that we're sure of that are getting too much fluoride just from Port Angeles water. Now, there are many sources of fluoride. If you want to have fluoride, the cheapest source, they call it about cost effective, just swallow a pea size of toothpaste. Pass out a little toothpaste to people. That's cheaper than medicating everybody against their choice, okay? But let them, FDA says, do not swallow. We've got a problem there. But the fish, tea, canned foods, beer, sodas, bottled waters, deep wells, volcano industry, drugs, a lot of fluoride in drugs because it's a really powerful element. It's wonderful. In fact, the EPA said no to post-harvest fuel against sulfurofluoride. And guess what Congress did? Dow Agrochemical went crying to them and said, you've got to allow us to put more fluoride on the foods. So now children can get up to 900 parts per million in their egg. Doesn't happen all the time, but they can. Where do they get that? School lunches. None of that is included in what is in the total dosages and right at this point. It's gone higher and higher, okay? So what we have is randomized controlled trials can be done. For example, in Alaska, water is hauled to different remote communities. Some of them can have the fluoride and some of them not. You don't say who it is, you just track them and find out what's happening. It's not that expensive, it can be done. To use the excuse that it can't be done is like saying, we can't get to the moon, guys, we can't get to the moon. It just can't be done. But we have done it.
And the Pro Committee has 4 minutes for a response.
Thank you. So, the question of other sources of fluoride, I think it's just really important to remember that fluoride is in our water naturally. It's a naturally occurring thing. We found fluoride naturally occurring, and we found that these kids that were naturally getting it, this compound, were not getting cavities. So that's how we discovered fluoride in the first place. And I think it's also really important to remember that as a dentist, that's one thing we're following up on is the halo effect that Todd mentioned earlier. Where are your other sources of fluoride? We're taking food into account. We're taking water. We're taking our recommendations for toothpaste into account to make sure that children and adults are getting the right amount at the right time in their life. So that being said, there is fluoride just naturally in your water. So you're probably going to ingest some because there's natural amounts of it. We are modifying it so it is the best amount to prevent tooth cavities. At the same time, we don't want you to get too much. So we're looking to make sure it's not on the other end. Even when you live in naturally fluoridated areas, we don't want you to get too much. We don't want you to get fluorosis, or we don't want to see those. We want to see the right amount that's protecting teeth. Communities in the US and throughout the world fluoridate their drinking water because it's the simplest, safest, and most cost-effective way to do this. It has an effect on there's other forms of fluoride that you're getting, varnish, toothpaste, and rinse, and the studies have shown all of these together along with that 0.7 parts per million in the water, and they're showing that those are working together cohesively to prevent cavities. For children, there are supplements that we can give. However, this is more expensive. It's also relying on compliance. These are not given by me, and these are not provided. These are only provided if the parents remember to give them, if they're giving the right amount, and if they're going to medical or dental providers that can give that to them. So those children are not getting those fat protection unless they are accessing the health care. And that's what we're worried about, is we want to help these people before they even know they need help. We want to not have them get lots of dental surgery at such a young age. In European countries, you see things like you get additives of salt, or you get milk fluoridation. They're giving fluoride to the children just in the same way we are. They're just using a different avenue of it. There's other countries in Europe that aren't giving fluoride because it just occurs naturally in their water. You also have to remember these countries, they have different access to care than we do. And we just want to make sure we're helping everyone even before they know they need help. And that's what water fluoridation is for.
And the Con Committee has 1 minute for rebuttal.
Okay, I want you to listen closely to what Dr. Butler is saying, because if you listen to that carefully, it's conflicting. Number one is naturally occurring fluoride. Yes, but what's the toxicity of calcium fluoride? See, calcium and fluoride love each other. That's why it goes to the teeth, that's why it goes to the bones, that's why it goes to the renal gland, that's why it gives you those kidney stones and all those kinds of things, because fluoride loves calcium. And they join together. When they first started looking at the fluoride issue, there was a controversy. Was it the hard water or was it the fluoride in the water that was reducing the dental caries? Well, the politics said, okay, it's the fluoride. But in reality, the hard water has as much or more benefit. Just because it's naturally occurring, arsenic is naturally occurring. It's a contaminant. Lead is naturally occurring. It's a contaminant. Fluoride is naturally occurring also, and it's a contaminant also. Now, how much fluoride do you want? 41% of children are now showing a toxic overdose of fluoride.
And the Pro Committee has 1 minute for rebuttal.
Well, first of all, I'm having a little trouble keeping straight some of these things I'd never heard of before, such as fluoride bomb tooth and calcium fluoride kidney stones. These are kind of inventions. They're not something that exists in the medical or the dental literature. But the important thing I think we're talking about here is what is the optimum amount of fluoride to have. And that's what community water fluoridation is all about, is that we know there's such a thing as too much, and we know there's such a thing as too little. Fluoride is present in all the water on this planet. It's really just an argument of what the right amount is, and that's been scientifically determined. It's currently about 0.7 parts per million, and ingesting that fluoride, if fluoride bomb teeth did exist, that would seem to be the treatment for it, because ingested fluoride in your first 8 years of life gets incorporated into the substance of your tooth. Thank you.
Question number 4. What studies and reviews show that community water fluoridation works to prevent tooth decay? And the Pro Committee has 4 minutes for their response.
So this is a very important question, and I'm excited to have this one. And the biggest reason is because water fluoridation works. There are countless amounts of studies. I have a box of them back here if any of you want to go through them. I could cite names and authors, but let's be honest, few of us will remember any of these by the time we leave the room. Let me start by saying this. You've heard the number already. There are more than 3,000 peer-reviewed studies, I'll come back to peer review in just a minute, that consistently show that people drinking optimally fluoridated water safely have fewer cavities and spend less money on dental care. Studies reviewed by my organization, the American Dental Association, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention show that 75% of our country that already have the benefit of water fluoridation will experience 25% less cavities in their lifetime. Fluoride and its role in the prevention of dental caries has been among the most studied diseases in the history of public health, and rightly so, as dental caries is still the most common chronic childhood disease. Now, I said I would come back to the peer review thing. Peer review is a process by which other leaders in the industry have accepted and reviewed a study and considered it relevant prior to its publication. But just because something is published does not make it credible. Sometimes bad science can come from peer review. This is important because you have two sides citing studies that draw the exact opposite conclusions. This is where the 3,000 number becomes very important. Once you have 3,000 peer-reviewed studies, you can draw some very strong conclusions about the safety and efficacy, of public water fluoridation. The original question asks for studies, so I will give you a few highlights. You've heard already many times about the Grand Rapids study in 1945. This was the first time that fluoridation was added to water. And you've also heard the number that 30,000 kids were monitored for 15 years. And the cavity rate after fluoride was added dropped by an astonishing 60% in just 11 years. With 75% of our country being fluoridated and almost all toothpastes having fluoride, we could not hope to repeat a study this size in our country. But these studies have been repeated many, many times continuously all over the world for the last 70 years as part of the 3,000 peer-reviewed studies that we touched on earlier. In 2010, one of the latest and largest studies in Australia at the University of Adelaide, they were able to sample 129,000 kids, 5 to 15 years old, from fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities. The results were really no surprise. 29% lower cavity rates in baby teeth, 31% in permanent teeth. Here in our community, we don't have a peer-reviewed study, but teeth are no different in Port Angeles than they are in Grand Rapids, or Australia, or other major cities in our country that show that it works. We did have a SMILE survey, which is simply dental people in our community reporting on the number of cavities that we see in our kids. And since 2005, when we added fluoride, we have seen a 20% reduction. And I will say that it is easy to say from the gut that we have seen a dramatic decrease in cavities. So even if we disagree on the SMILE survey, it's working. I've been a dentist here in and I want to say that the community, also the school district, we have become one of the top in the state in our test scores in that same amount of time. I and my colleagues here tonight, I have some all-stars I want to mention really quick. Dr. Birch, Dr. Royak, Dr. Van Dyken, Dr. Howarth, Dr. Little. These are people, we are in the trenches volunteering to help the kids and the veterans and the fixed income seniors. These people actually aren't going to be paying any utility bills. And won't take survey.
The Economy Committee has 4 minutes for their response.
Okay, peer-reviewed. That means sometimes that because we all agree, That doesn't mean that there are mistakes with peer review. There are a lot of studies, but if you look at those studies, the vast majority of them are talking about estimates of assumptions. So they assume there's a benefit, they estimate the benefit that's going to happen from it, and then they assume that there's no risk. Those kinds of studies, as long as they say it clearly, yes, they're correct. But you have to put the weight of evidence on assumptions and estimates. Do you balance your bank account with estimates and assumptions? So it's 3,000 studies. They're really, really poor quality studies. There are no high quality studies. The real peer review that you do is when you go to the FDA and get approval. Dr. Locke mentions, well, it's the EPA that handles the water. Yeah, but the EPA is prohibited by Congress from regulating anything that's added for the treatment of humans. Okay? Do not swallow. Here's a Cochrane review, 2015. This is the latest one. I'm surprised they haven't brought it up. Cochrane is one of the best, right up there with National Research Council. Right now, I'm working with the Office of Health Assessment and Translation with the review of fluoridation because they're very concerned about brain damage. They're doing a developmental neurotoxic study. I'm working with them, giving them evidence and research. They work closely with the Cochrane, they work with National Research. It says, although these results indicate that water fluoridation is effective at reducing levels of tooth decay in children's baby and permanent teeth, the applicability of the results to current lifestyles is unclear because the majority of the studies were conducted before fluoride toothpaste and other preventive measures were widely used in many countries around the world. Most of this was way back before the 1970s, 1960s that showed benefit. It doesn't show that so much anymore. If you listen to the Grand Rapids mixture way back there was insufficient information available to find out whether the introduction of water fluoridation program changed existing differences in tooth decay across socioeconomics, or that there was insufficient information available to understand the effect of stopping water fluoridation programs on tooth decay. There are no studies met the review's inclusion criteria that investigated the effectiveness of water fluoridation for preventing tooth decay in adults rather than children. There's lots that we don't know there. Here is a whole list of things that these 3,000 studies don't include. I've said a lot of this stuff to you before, but there are many of them here. And Dr. Locke hasn't heard of some of them because he hasn't looked. He only looks at what the American Dental Association puts out and the pro-fluoridation people put out. He needs to look at the other side. For instance, if you look at the data carefully on the American Dental Association 2009, Eden Kumar, we see here that yes, at the bottom there's 0.3, 0.37, increasing amount of fluoride in the water. Yes, we all agree with that. There's an increase in blue lines of dental fluorosis, which they said would not happen when we added fluoride at 1 part million. But now let's look at the rate of decay at the top there. Okay, that top left, that's how much benefit you're going to get. You can hardly see the difference. And then you see, if you get just a little bit too much, there's more decay. That's why the research isn't showing the benefit unless you use gee whiz percentages rather than a true percentages. For every dollar spent on fluoridation, $38 a treatment is simply speculation. In actual measured evidence, it doesn't show that. If okay, let me back up. If indeed there is even 0.038 IQ loss of 1 point, that negates all $38 of savings. So this cost effectiveness, yes, maybe, no if you measure it, and no if you demand quality evidence, and no if you include any risks. Thank you.
And the Pro Committee has 1 minute for a rebuttal.
There are so many studies of community water fluoridation that it's really impossible in a forum like this to go through every one. We have those who are interested in that level of detail. I reference you to the ilikemyteeth.org website, which does a very good job of that. What I would offer as a counterbalance to this is these issues, the validity of the science, the effectiveness, the safety. This has been reviewed over and over again by these national review boards. It was done in England, it's been done in the United States, it was most recently done in New Zealand in 2014. And they all come up with the same conclusion, safe and effective. So when eminent scientists look at all the evidence, they always end up supporting this. And I trust their review. Their reviews take months, they're comprehensive, and they largely refute the kind of misquoted and piecemeal evidence you're being given tonight.
And the committee has 1 minute for a rebuttal.
I would challenge Dr. Locke to actually read those studies, because that's not what they say that is safe and effective. Those studies actually show that there are many aspects of fluoride ingestion that they have great uncertainty on, just like I read you on the Cochrane study. That is the latest one of very high level, and it's pretty similar to all the others. We need more research. You don't go and mass medicate everybody against their consent. See that flag right there? We live in the land of the free. For heaven's sakes, why can't you give people their freedom and just say, if you want fluoride, do a little bit of toothpaste, drink a little more tea, eat a few more grapes. There's lots of fluoride in many locations. 41% of children now have dental fluorosis. Dental fluorosis is a sign of an overexposure of fluoride. I'm pleased that people here have good IQ, but you don't know what you would have had if you hadn't had the damage. And we don't know yet. When is it? Is it the fetus? Is it the developing child? Where is it that's causing the damage?
There are 2 more questions. The 5th question is, what accounts for the fact that incidence of tooth decay in developed countries like Western Europe has decreased at the same time as in fluoridated cities in the United States? And the committee has 4 minutes for their response.
Okay, previously you were told a little bit about the halo effect. Yeah, the halo effect is there. But let's look at this a little bit closer. Why does Europe not have the same rates of decay as ours? Well, number one, the FDA says do not swallow. It's not effective. And that's what Europe has done. Part of the problem is we do have similar socioeconomics, similar oral hygiene, similar diets, within reason, similar topical fluoride. But what's happened here is Austria has rejected fluoride, toxic fluorides. Now, this isn't just peer review. These are the scientists who are regulators. To my knowledge, there's not one drug regulatory agency worldwide, in any country, that has approved the ingestion of fluoride as safe and effective, The FDA has not. Austria rejected it. Belgium rejected it. I can't read this. Finland stopped it. Germany. You know what was so cool? I read the study. When East and West Germany came together and united, guess what one of the first things that West Germany did? They went in there and they turned off the fluoride pumps. Very easy, okay? And what happened to dental decay? It dropped. All these other countries doing the same thing. What about this slide here? These are the countries, all those countries on the top over there, Austria, Belgium, Denmark, etc., they're all reducing World Health Organization data. And there's 4 countries there that don't have fluoridation, that are fluoridated, and the others are not fluoridated. All of them have reduced down to the same low level, but some of the countries reduced much more than we have. They had more decay, but they reduced it faster, and without fluoridation. Why? Well, fluoridation doesn't work. That's what it is. That's why the FDA says it doesn't work. What about fluoridated salts? That was brought up. Same thing. What we got here is in the British Medical Journal, published. Fluoridated salts, it doesn't make any difference. When we look at, this is a peer-reviewed published also, when we rank the states in the order of the percentage of the whole population fluoridated, from nobody fluoridated to everybody fluoridated, and we compare them. This is just ecological evidence. It's not randomized controlled trial. But we find that the wealthy have about 76, 77% say, yeah, we got excellent teeth. When we look at the poor, it's not quite as consistent, but it's pretty much right there at about 52%. And that's where I was making my mistake when I was sitting on that side over there. I was looking at socioeconomics. As the socioeconomics go up, the health of the community goes up. There's fewer dental caries. It all improves. And so you have to control in all these studies for socioeconomics. If that's not controlled, Dr. Butler, I don't send her the wealthy kids usually. And I don't, because they don't need it. They don't have the problem. Why? We don't know exactly why, but it's not fluoridation. Higher income, better teeth. I've shown you this one before. What happened before fluoridation? It's much less decay now. And they say, okay, but the decay is dropping. We know the decay is dropping over the last 10 years. That's anecdotal, which is important, but it's just anecdotal. When you look at it, that's been happening throughout the United States for the last 70 years, regardless of fluoridation. Cessation, it doesn't go up when you stop fluoridating. Modern studies find difficulty in measuring the benefits of fluoridation. Not taking into account delayed tooth eruption makes early fluoridation studies overestimates of benefits because there's a delay in the eruption. I think I'm supposed to stop. Yeah?
And the Clallam Committee has 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Thank you. Well, many countries, in addition to the United States, practice community water fluoridation. These include Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, and Spain. Like us, they found that water fluoridation safely and effectively reduces cavities and improves dental health. And this is why the World Health Organization endorses water fluoridation as a safe and effective way to prevent cavities. In total, 450 million people in 60 different countries drink optimally fluoridated water. And about 54% of them are Americans. As we mentioned, fluoridated salt in milk are widely practiced in continental Europe in countries such as France, Germany, and Switzerland. So while residents there are not drinking fluoridated water, they are receiving recommended levels of fluoride in other ways. One of the reasons for this difference is that the cities in Europe are very old, and so is their plumbing. And few have the large centralized water systems that are present in more recently developed. Oh, I'm sorry, this was a rebuttal. I thought,
Yes, this was the rebuttal.
No.
no, this was the 4 minutes.
Oh, I thought it was a rebuttal.
This is the rebuttal.
This was a rebuttal.
To this fifth question. Sorry.
It was a rebuttal. She had announced a rebuttal.
Yes, and they just did their 1 minute rebuttal of this.
No. He did 4
I should
minutes.
do a 4 minute.
He did 4 minutes, and this was a rebuttal. We haven't done it. No. He did 4 minutes. Oh, we haven't.
No, you both did your 4 minute. Your four.
I was just doing my 4 minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
So may I continue?
Okay, continue.
And let me just start with the water system issue.
Start over if you want.
Start over. So I was just talking about these European countries in many cases don't have centralized water systems. They have water systems that have multiple point sources, and those are very hard to fluoridate. There's also areas in Europe like Italy that much of the country has naturally fluoridated water, and they have no need to add it. But this is the really important part of this question. And there's another very major difference between the United States and Western Europe. And that is that all Western European countries have lifelong free dental care for all residents. This means that more attention is paid in other ways to preventing and treating cavities. Dental care, like health care, is a right, not a privilege in those countries. Advances in dental care, widespread use of fluoridated toothpaste, use of alternate forms of fluoride supplements, and access to universal dental care are the reasons that developed nations that do not fluoridate their water have achieved dramatic reductions in decay rates. Unfortunately, in the United States, we still have shocking disparities in access to dental care. We have many families and children living in poverty. And we have a fast food culture that promotes cheap, high sugar, high starch diets. Dental health would be much worse in the United States if 3 out of every 4 Americans did not have access to fluoridated water. And this is a very important dimension to this problem. Dental disease disproportionately impacts the poor in our country, as Dr. Osmunson has conceded. Fluoridating community water systems helps to overcome at least some of this disparity. Thank you.
I'm sorry for the confusion. This is now the Con Committee's rebuttal, and you have 1 minute.
Yes, as the Cochrane review said, there's not evidence that it fixes the socioeconomic disparity. I'm working at Neah Bay right now. When you have free dentistry, a lot of times it's not valued very much. And I have to create value for health there, where I would in my private practice with saying, it costs money, Mom, we got to work on this. So disparity is a problem, but that's more of socioeconomics than it is of fluoride. 60% of France used to have fluoride, now 30%. They don't put it in any of the processed foods. That's off the shelf if you want to buy it, and people are buying it less and less. They talk about central water systems. I lived over in Europe. They have water systems, many of them much larger than Port Angeles. They could fluoridate, but frequently their courts have said, no, you can't. Israel stopped. So am I.
And the Pro Committee now has 1 minute for rebuttal.
Well, I would like to, in the short time, just address this issue we were hearing earlier, about drug regulation and random control studies, and emphasize the fact that fluoride is not a drug. Fluoride is an element. It's the 13th most common element on the planet. It's present in the water, all the water on the planet. It's best described as a beneficial micronutrient. And it's a regulated water additive. It's among 50 different water additives that are put in public water systems to make them safe and healthy. We don't have distilled water coming out of our taps. We have very carefully treated water, and that's what makes the United States water system the safest and the healthiest in the world.
The last question that the council selected for this educational forum is, who are the organizations that either support or object to water fluoridation? And the pro committee has the first response for 4 minutes.
First, I would like to thank you for taking the time to hold this forum. I hope we provide you with the information that you need to make this important decision. I know it has allowed me a chance to recommit myself to this cause. This is such an important question for most of us. It gets down to the basic question of what can you believe and who can you trust? Let me start with talking about my own experience. When I was asked 10 years ago by a group of concerned citizens and doctors to make water fluoridation a reality here in Port Angeles, I said, sure, it's part of my training and I didn't think anything of it. When I started hearing claims about the concerns of cancer and brittle bones and birth defects and low IQs and all the things that you're hearing tonight, I was naturally very alarmed. I went to work to make sure that I was not putting my children, your children, my patients, and our community in harm's way. I did my research. It soon became clear that every concern that had been raised was thoughtfully researched, rebutted, and put to rest. So let's answer the question. Which organizations support public water fluoridation? There are over 100 highly regarded national and international scientific, humanitarian, and professional organizations that support community water fluoridation. The list is actually too long to read here in 4 minutes. But let me name a few. Of course, there's the American Dental Association and the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, who list water fluoridation as one of the top 10 public health achievements in the 20th century. Even the American Cancer Society has said that there is no link between water fluoridation and cancer. As a matter of fact, fluoride is recommended by oncologists routinely for patients undergoing cancer therapy that can cause devastating dental caries. The list goes on and really represents the best and the brightest, the who's who, in healthcare and science. This year, at our state level, another 25 state health organizations wrote to the Washington State Board of Health, re-emphasizing their support for public water fluoridation. And that brings me to our own community. We have an overwhelming majority of healthcare providers who believe in continuing our fluoridation program because it works. I am also proud to tell you that 100% of the dentists in Port Angeles are also in support. As to the part of the question that asks who objects to water fluoridation, not one credible major scientific organization, not one. There are a few anti-fluoride groups that exist solely to oppose water fluoridation. It is actually quite easy to fight a fluoride campaign. If you listen to the opposition, if you claim that it causes dozens of horrifying diseases, it will scare people. If that doesn't work, just suggest it's undemocratic or unethical or a conspiracy or it will raise taxes. Once all of these have been disproven, just claim that there just aren't enough studies. Dr. Osmunson is here tonight and happens to be a board member and a spokesperson for an anti-fluoridation group, the Fluoride Action Network. His job for them is to travel around from community to community, talking about the dangers and the injustices of community water fluoridation that don't exist. So back to my original question, who can you trust? Whether you choose to trust the world and national leaders in health and science, or you prefer to trust your local dentists, you can rest assured that you are on solid ground. Thank you.
For pro-clean water. I truly believe that all of us in this room want what's best for the citizens of Port Angeles. It's the job of Tom, City Council, all physicians, and all of us to protect the total health of the citizens of Port Angeles. We know that from history, Even when everyone wants the greatest good, sometimes new evidence comes forth, and for a moment in time it can appear that we are split in believing what's best. At this time, the facts are becoming clearer to a growing number of people that fluoridation is not safe. As with Agent Orange and cigarettes, for a period of time, only a few people go to whistleblowers. And with the money behind cigarettes, they were able to manipulate many studies to prove how safe and non-addictive cigarettes were. Now, we know that that was an abuse of science, an abuse of authority, an abuse of trust. So let's look at Port Angeles community as if it was a wonderful pie. Our concerns of the groups, those slices of pie, that appear to potentially already be at risk of toxic levels of fluoridation exposure, or are particularly vulnerable to any level of additional fluoride. Babies. The CDC states, quote, "The kind of formula that must be mixed with water may increase the chance of dental fluorosis." See the video, Poisoned Babies, on YouTube. This kind of excludes the low-income people from being able to take care of their children and not giving them fluoridated formula. Youth, as it's been said many times this evening, 40% of children already have fluorosis, which is caused by the suppression of the enzyme MMP20. This very same enzyme is vitally important for that child's natural development. Insurance does not pay to repair fluorosis because it's considered a cosmetic problem. Elderly. Long-term exposure to fluoride builds up in the body, as we all know. Weakens muscles, causes anemia, stiffens joints, causes osteoporosis, bone spurs, and digestive complaints. Folks with compromised kidneys. National Kidney Foundation endorsed fluoridation until 2008, when it was brought to their attention that as the kidney function decreases, the retention of fluoride increases, creating toxic levels. There are a number of other organizations that have also withdrawn their endorsements. People taking one of the 100 fluoridated prescriptions, such as Prozac, Cipro, Paxil, and many of the antibiotics, also are at risk of being overexposed to fluoride. An increasing percent of people with thyroid issues. This is the big one for me. Thyroid meds are now the most prescribed pharmaceutical in the United States. Fluoride is so toxic that in the 1950s it was used to suppress hyperthyroidism. Studies are now showing that fluoridated communities have at least 2 times the amount of hypothyroidism. I'm finding in my practice that approximately 60% of my patients have some form of thyroid distress. I suspect that there are now more people in Port Angeles with thyroid issues than there are children. Undiagnosed and untreated, this condition can destroy the quality of life. Folks that are drinking large volumes of water, including diabetics, which I've found most of them are suffering from a form of thyroid distress. Athletes and folks that believed it when they were told drinking more water is good for you are all in danger of drinking too much fluoridated water. Immune-weakened individuals. Fluoride markedly suppresses the enzymes in our body, including the enzymes that repair our DNA. Dr. David Kennedy, who is a 3rd-generation dentist, quoted to me that at 1 point per million, the enzyme that repairs DNA, big deal, is reduced by 50%. People who buy bottled water to avoid fluoride, which is in turn creates a burden on our environment and comes with it its own set of health problems. People who are eating fluoride-ridden foods. Fluoride is so toxic, it is a standalone pesticide. And it accumulates in the soil and in the crops. And back in the 1800s, it was approved for being a pesticide long before it was used in water. People who are eating organically, first of all, most of this group are aware they don't want fluoride. And second of all, the U.S. requires all fresh foods crossing country lines be fumigated with Dow Chemicals sulfuryl fluoride. Europe refuses this fumigation of any foods that we import to them. Folks growing their own gardens on Port Angeles fluoridated water are already getting concentrated amounts in their vegetables. And just for kids, let's add to the pie our pets, who drink 2 to 5 times more water per pound than we do, thus increasing their exposure as well to over 1 part per million. And nature. Salmon studied at John Day Dam showed that low doses of fluoride negatively affected their ability to migrate and to spawn. Water treatment plants do not take out the fluoride before it's put back into our water system, our water or ocean. It seems just about the whole pie of Port Angeles is already endangered by multiple sources of excess fluoride. And I would venture to say that all of us agree, that if there was an increase in suffering to any one of these pieces of the Port Angeles community pie, it would be sufficient to stop fluoridation. When you remove fluoride from Port Angeles water, not one person's right to have as much fluoride as they want has been violated. It's simply unethical to force people, a lot of people, who have fluoride against their will. They're forced to use in their own homes what they feel is unsafe water for the bathing and the showering of their own children. All this being said, the question should be, why? Why add fluoride to our drinking water? Yes, there are studies that show it's effective in killing tooth decay topically. It kills everything. But there is not one conclusive study that benefits oral health when added to our drinking water. "98% of Europe has removed it or doesn't have it from their water. Yes, if it's in their salt or their milk, that gives them the option. Israel just stopped, as it was said. Perhaps that's why we're now buying our fluoride from them. I believe no one in this room wants to look back in 10 more years and realize by ignoring the evidence now, they've hurt people. Together, let's make a decision to be proactive in protecting the community we all love.
Right about the time Marilyn Monroe's career was taking off in 1951, water fluoridation became an official policy of the U.S. Public Health Service. Over the next 60 years, 75% of our tap water would be artificially fluoridated, with children singing the praises of this new wonder drug treatment, the answer to tooth decay. Fluoride spread from drinking water to the multitude of processed beverages and foods containing water. From soups to juices to beer to our morning coffee, currently more than 210 million Americans are dosed daily with fluoride, making it the most widely distributed drug in the country.
Fluoride added to water is a drug. If you look at any definition of a drug is a substance that is used to prevent disease. And the only reason, the very reason, it's added to water is to prevent the disease of dental decay.
It's an uncontrolled dosage. Nobody knows exactly how much any individual is getting. Nobody's checking to see if it's working for that individual or if there are any side effects for that individual. So it goes against everything we have now about informed consent.
That should concern us all, because informed consent is a fundamental tenet of ethical medical practice. At times, fluoride is compared to vitamin D or folic acid, but in actuality, that comparison is completely wrong. Vitamin D and folic acids are vitamins or nutrients that we need to be healthy, and without them, we would be sick or even die. But without fluoride, we would be perfectly healthy.
We have a moral obligation and responsibility to assure that all people have the right to what it is that they're putting into their bodies.
The Supreme Court has held that all Americans have a fundamental right to refuse medical treatment. This is part of our basic liberties guaranteed to all of us pursuant to the 14th Amendment.
But refusing medical treatment in the case of fluoride is extremely difficult because ordinary household filters do not remove fluoride. And it's also in almost every beverage or soup containing water. You would literally have to stop going out to opt out of this drug. Hexafluorosilicic acid, or HFSA for short, is the fluoride chemical added to our water. It comes from the smokestacks of the phosphate industry, captured by what are called wet scrubbers, put in place under the Clean Air Act to remove fluorine gas and other pollutants. This HFSA slurry is not pure, containing trace amounts of arsenic, mercury, cadmium, thallium, radionuclides, and lead. An industrial waste byproduct turned public health benefit was welcomed by the EPA's Rebecca Hamner. In a letter from 1983, she wrote, "In regard to the use of fluorosilicic acid as a source of fluoride for fluoridation, this agency regards such use as an ideal environmental solution to a long-standing problem. By recovering byproduct fluorosilicic acid from fertilizer manufacturing, water and air pollution are minimized, and water utilities have a low-cost source of fluoride available to them."
So why would we ever add a chemical that contains those neurotoxins as part of getting fluoride in the water, which is a neurotoxin in itself?
Most of the neurotoxic substances and carcinogenic substances are considered to not have a threshold, meaning that there's no level below which they're safe.
Fluoride definitely crosses the placenta, so in actuality, the dose for a fetus that is safe in terms of a neurotoxin is 0, but if a pregnant woman is drinking fluoridated tap water, she's exposing her fetus to quite a bit of fluoride, certainly an amount that's above what we know to be safe for the child's developing brain.
We have a scarred history with chemicals and drugs once thought to be safe, like asbestos and Vioxx. And known toxins like lead were widely used in gasoline, paint, and water pipes. In 1925, we thought 100 parts per billion of lead was safe to drink. In 88, it was 50, then 15. Arsenic is the same. 50 parts per billion used to be safe, then a dramatic drop to 10. In 1962, the Department of Health and Human Services recommended a maximum of 1.2 milligrams of fluoride per liter of water, but in 2015 it dropped to 0.7, a 40% reduction in what was deemed safe for the last 55 years. The current EPA goal for arsenic and lead is 0. Will fluoride follow suit as we come to grips with recent science?
It took decades to get lead out of gasoline and lead out of paint, even though we knew, or the science was clear, that lead posed substantial risks to the brain. It still took decades to get it out, and the industries that were invested in lead fought tooth and nail.
Based on modern science, most countries have discontinued or never begun water fluoridation. In fact, 97% of Western European countries do not fluoridate their water, a significant fact in light of data collected by the World Health Organization. In the United States, there was a steady decline in tooth decay from the 1970s up to 2010, and credit is given to fluoridation. So what about non-fluoridated countries, represented here by NF? Curiously enough, country after country without fluoridation has the exact same reduction in tooth decay. So what does fluoride in our drinking water really do?
We said in the NRC report that fluoride is an endocrine disruptor. It has an adverse effect on normal endocrine function. The normal function of the thyroid hormone doesn't happen, it's reduced.
The thyroid is a small butterfly-shaped gland in the neck, regulating our weight, fertility, optimal brain development, and our energy levels. Current
You can watch the rest of this if you'd like. It's on the computer here.
Thank you. The final closing statement now will be made by the committee in support of fluoridation.
Yes, thank you, and I apologize about the Seahawks game, but that's what TiVo is for. I'd like to use the first part of this 15 minutes to address some of the claims that you've heard tonight. There are way too many dubious claims and misstatements of fact for me to address individually, but I'll try to hit the highlights. The first I'd like to just briefly mention is the very surprising news that the Department of Health has admonished the Washington Dental Service Foundation over some report we've done on the SMILE survey. And if you don't know what the SMILE survey is, this is a collaborative effort between the Department of Health, the Washington Dental Service Foundation, local health departments, the schools, and the Office of the Superintendent of Public Education. And every 5 years we send dental hygienists out to examine the teeth of children. We've done that in Clallam County here in the year 2000, in 2005, we did it in 2010. The difference between 2005 and 2010 is what we were referring to. And this was a joint report we put out. It's not conflicting reports. So the numbers we have quoted are from the Department of Health report. And then importantly, we're doing that survey again this year. So data is being collected currently in the year 2015 and will be available early next year. And that's a very important study. Next, I'd like to address this IQ issue. This controversy has been going on for 70 years, and I've been involved in it for 40. And it seems like every year or two there's a new boogeyman, and this is the current boogeyman, is that community water fluoridation lowers IQ. It's simply untrue. The allegation is based on this study that our opponents like to call the Harvard study. And it's actually not a Harvard study, but it was published in a respectable journal, and it was some of the authors included faculty members of the Harvard School of Public Health. And it looked at 27 different surveys, most done in China in the early 1990s. And the researchers of the paper themselves said these studies are of very low quality and have problems in many cases. So the study looked at IQ scores in different communities, those that had very high naturally occurring fluoride and those that had low naturally occurring fluoride. And interestingly, in this study, the low fluoride control groups, their level of fluoride is very similar to what we're advocating. It was between 0.5 and 1 parts per million, and we're advocating 0.7 parts per million. The studies were very crude. They failed to look at any of the other causes that could affect IQ, like lead or arsenic or industrial toxins or poverty. And what many people have commented on this study is that it really has no bearing on the very low levels of fluoride that we advocate for community water fluoridation. The deans of the School of Public Health of Harvard and the School of Medicine have said as much, and after the study came out, they were quick to reinforce their unqualified support for community water fluoridation. If you want a good study of community water fluoridation and IQ, one was recently done in New Zealand and done the right way, where you compare the IQ of a community that's fluoridated, the IQ of one that's not, and do all the appropriate statistical controls. And that study was very clear, no difference whatsoever. So this is scare tactics, and it's a complete fallacy. Next, I want to comment on the notion that it's the city council's job to go out and do all this research and interpret these studies. And that seems to be an impossible task for a city council, especially with as much bad research as out there. I council's job is to review scientific research and expert opinion, decide what's credible and believe what's credible and act on it, and don't believe what's not credible. I also want to comment on this when in doubt, leave it out notion. This is just bad policy, and especially when what you're leaving out is something that we know to be effective, and we know we have an urgent need to do something about these high levels of cavities and oral health disease, especially in children. Leaving it out does real harm. And finally, just briefly, this whole thing about the toothpaste warning. The warning to not swallow it has two bases. Some kids like to swallow the whole tube, and that's not advisable. But really what that's about is to try to minimize the ingestion of excess fluoride in those first 8 years of life. Kids don't have a good swallowing reflex. They tend to swallow toothpaste. And that, plus the fluoride they get in water and food and rinses and other sources, that's what leads to fluorosis. And it's important to realize fluorosis doesn't just occur in communities that have fluoridated water. It occurs in non-fluoridated communities as well. It just has to do with getting slightly more fluoride than you need in those first 8 years of life. And it's really cosmetic. Your teeth are strong, they're hard, they're cavity resistant. Many dentists consider fluorosis in teeth to be optimally fluoridated teeth. And really what we're all about in this is trying to seek that optimal level of fluoride to protect our teeth from the ravages of dental decay. And then I think that's my main points. And then at this point, I'd just like to say that it's been a real honor to have this opportunity to address the council and our audience tonight. And it's a personal honor that I get to close this presentation. I'd also like to thank the audience for their very civil behavior and respectfully giving all speakers a chance to be heard. This is the Port Angeles I know and love. So, over 10 years ago, a broad-based coalition of healthcare providers, both medical and dental, and many other community members, teachers, elected officials, parents, grandparents, all came together to deal with the shockingly high rates of dental disease in this community. We saw it up close. We saw it in our offices and in our emergency rooms, in our classrooms, and elsewhere. And we were motivated by the human misery we witnessed and the knowledge that much of it could be prevented. And after much effort, the Port Angeles joined the overwhelming majority of Americans who enjoy the benefits of community water fluoridation. In 2006, this group was given the prestigious Heroes of Healthcare Award by the Washington Health Foundation in recognition for this achievement. In addition to fluoridation, we have made major strides in improving oral health in other ways. And this is coming at a time when we are rediscovering the importance of oral health to overall health. We now know scientifically that oral health disease is linked to premature birth and low birth weight babies, to diabetes, and to heart disease. It's a chronic, communicable, infectious disease that can be spread from mother to infant and from child to child. And we know that bad teeth impair nutrition, and they have major psychological effects. And it's a major source of chronic pain and can lead to drug addiction. We are passionate about this issue, not only because its impact on community health, but also because of our professional knowledge that almost all of this is preventable. We have the technical knowledge to assure that every child spends their entire life without ever experiencing a cavity. What we are lacking is the political commitment and the community investment to make this a reality. The strategy for achieving this vision of a cavity-free generation and drastically reducing dental decay in adults and elders is like a three-legged stool. These three legs are, number one, community water fluoridation. Number two, universal access to preventive dental care starting at 1 year of age and extending throughout life. And number three, better coordination of our medical care and dental care systems so they work together, not independently, to detect and treat problems at the earliest possible stages. Those opposed to community water fluoridation are asking us to saw off the legs of one of these three-legged stools. They're asking us to put all our resources into individual services and treating disease. And this simply will not work. We will never be able to address the problems unless we invest in the most cost-effective ways to prevent them. And that way, as you've heard in detail tonight, is community water fluoridation, where every dollar spent reaps 34 or more dollars in cost savings. On a personal note, this year marks my 40th year as a physician, and I've spent 36 of these years here on the North Olympic Peninsula. I worked in primary care, I worked in public health, I pursued my medical specialty of preventive care, and all of this has compelled me to be an advocate on this issue. I see the impacts of poor oral health on children and adults on a daily basis. And I understand the public health research that supports the safety and effectiveness of water fluoridation, and it's rock solid. It's high quality scientific research. And I know that preventing disease is always better than treating it. But I also know that prevention takes more than just lip service. We have to invest in prevention. Tonight we are asking the City Council and the citizens of Port Angeles to continue the investment that was started over a decade ago. We are the people you have entrusted with your medical and dental care. We want this community to be a healthy community. Many of us live here. All of us visit frequently and shop and dine and recreate here. We drink the water, our families drink the water, and we are grateful that it is safe and healthy. Would we really do that if we thought any of these fear-based allegations that our opponents say are truthful? Would we want our families to take any of these health risks? Of course not. We understand that this is the most exhaustively researched topic in the history of public health. Its safety and effectiveness is well established. Over 75, or close to 75% of our fellow Americans drink either naturally fluoridated water or water that has minute amounts added. And this has been going on now for over 3 generations. None of these scare stories you hear about have come to pass. Something we keep hearing again and again is how we see these studies of high levels of fluoride causing harm. And that somehow should mean that low levels are also harmful. But this is against the universal law of biology, that things that are healthy in small amounts are usually harmful in large amounts. It applies to salt and water and even the oxygen we breathe. This is the biggest fallacy of the anti-fluoride movement. So as we conclude tonight's session and we prepare for next week's public meeting where the citizens of the city get to speak, we will certainly hear more from the naysayers, but we will also hear from a broad range of community members who want to live in a community that promotes all forms of health, including oral health. Community water fluoridation was a major step forward for the health of Port Angeles and all who work and visit here. Now we have to defend that progress from those who want to turn back the clock. It's time for this community to speak up and convince the City Council that their predecessors made a brave and a wise decision 10 years ago, a decision that should be maintained, not dismantled. Thank you.
I think you'll agree with me that this has been a highly informative meeting. As Dr. Locke said, next Thursday evening, October 29th, again at 6 p.m., there will be a second public hearing. This will be your opportunity, you, the public, to express your views on fluoridation to the members of the City Council. I hope you will attend, and I hope you will encourage others to attend. The Council is particularly interested in hearing from residents who live within the area receiving city fluoridated water. And now, please join me in a round of applause for all the participants.